Hey, this is Eric from Catching Light.
Hey, this is Hemp.
Hey, this is Glenn.
Hi, I'm Steve-O.
Hey, this is Drew Hines with Hindsight Imagery.
This is Matt Callahan at Digimatty Photographic Services.
Hey, this is Jason, and welcome to Tales from the Pit. Hello and welcome to Tales from the Pit, the behind the lens access for concerts and photography. Today we have a very special guest. He's someone that I followed his work for several years. He's done some really awesome stuff. I'm really excited to have him on the show. Stephen Jensen from Wornstar and many other things. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing well. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Before we get into all the cool stuff, if you wouldn't mind giving us sort of a brief history of how you got involved in the stuff you're doing. What was your path that got you to where you are?
Sure. Well, when I was in high school, I started playing guitar and was really into the whole music scene, really discovered music and my love for it. Played in several bands and throughout the years in the Chicago scene. But all the while I really loved visual arts. So after high school, I went to college and got a fine arts degree, an associate fine arts degree. And then I went to Columbia College after that to get a bachelor's. And that's when I really started photography. This was back in 91, so still the film days. And, my mother was a photographer and an artist, and I really just took a liking to photography. So I decided to go that route. And so I originally was a photography major in college. But at that time, computers were just starting to come out. The Mac was just starting to come out. And I really got into that. I really enjoyed working on a computer and seeing what it can do and pushing its limits. And I really enjoyed design. And I found myself that I was better at design than I was at photography. Well, I was good at, let me correct that. I was good at photography, but I didn't enjoy the darkroom, I guess. I didn't enjoy that part of I enjoyed shooting. I didn't enjoy all the processing in the darkroom. And there were some artists at my college in my class that just blew me away in the darkroom. We were doing these amazing prints, and I just couldn't get it. I just had no patience for it. So I switched over to graphic design and kept photography as my minor until much later. I started doing freelance graphic design, and I really enjoyed staying in the music industry. So I enjoyed doing album covers and logos, band logos, and stuff like that, and then and did some band photos for the bands that I was in on the side. Really crummy work at the time. But then later on, when digital photography started to get better, when it finally caught up to, it got to the point where it was getting to be as good as film. So for years, I was doing work as an art director, graphic designer, working with another photographer in the city. And it was fantastic in Chicago. And it was fantastic because it was like having two photographers on set. We can both light it, we can both shoot it. But it was really good to be an art director directing him on what I wanted, and then being able to take that work into Photoshop and do the design work that I liked to do and the Photoshop work that I like to do. But then, the cameras caught up, and I bought a Nikon D100 body. Yep. My photographer was a Nikon shooter, and he refused to go digital. So I bought a body, brought it to a shoot one day, and we were doing an album cover, and I already had the album cover laid out, and I knew what we were going to shoot, and we were also going to shoot the band separately. So we had the props all put together. We shot the props. I brought it into Photoshop. I finished the album cover before the band showed up. Band shows up, goes, "That looks amazing. It's approved." We shot the band. I popped it into the layout. "That looks amazing." Approved, and we approved everything on site. And that was the game changer for me. So then my photographer finally goes, "Yeah, I think I'm going to go digital." But after I just spent a lot of money on a body, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start shooting myself.
Yeah.
So I started buying lenses and started doing photography instead of driving all the way to Chicago out in the suburbs where I'm at. And so I did that for a while. And then I kept doing more stuff in the music industry because I love the music industry. I started attending NAMM, and I started working with guitar companies and drum companies.
Are you doing this as a photographer, or are you doing this as a graphic artist, or both?
As both.
Okay, yeah.
As both. I started working with Dean Guitars. That was the one I worked with the most. I was their freelance art director for about 5 or 6 years, and did some of the photography for that too, and designed a lot of guitars and ads, and basically a look for them for several years, and worked with a lot of artists. Got to work with a lot of artists at that stage. So then when I started, let's see, late 2000s, so about 2008, 2009, I was still doing freelance, and a lot of the freelance work had fallen off because of the recession. So it was getting really difficult to get paid as a freelancer and pay your bills and pay your insurance and all that fun stuff. So my wife is a stylist. So all the band shoots that we would do, she would style the bands and dress them, and, either shop for them or customize clothing for them or make clothing from scratch for them. And they really liked what she was doing. And at the same time, I was designing shirts for bands I was doing it for a few clients of mine, and I was trying to get more work in that, but no one was biting. So I decided we decided to, with my wife Sylvia as a stylist, we promoted the fact that we were one of the only music photo studios in the city, in the Chicago area, that also had a stylist on staff. So we would end up where we did that to try and bring in more work. And then the interest was so high, and I started designing some t-shirts and show them to some of my clients and say, "Hey, what do you think of this? Is this great? Would you buy it? Is it garbage?" And then we got really good reaction to it. So I started designing a line of that, and then combined it with Sylvia's custom work. And we started Wornstar just as a side project to help pay the bills, to help make ends meet. And then Wornstar kind of took on a life of its own and took over my life for the next 12 years up until now. It just, we took all the money that we made from it, we put it right back into it, and tried to keep growing it, because we're like, we've got something here. We've got something that people are interested in, and we're starting to pay our bills. So for a long time, I was still doing freelance. I still do freelance once in a while. There's certain clients I just can't say no to,
right?
That are kind of grandfathered in. And I also do it to stay fresh once in a while. But now I'm running this company full time, and the creative director for this company, and doing most of the photography and most of the design. And I love what I do, and I still get to do everything that I've always wanted to do. I get to do visual arts in the music industry.
Yeah, and still have that creative juices flowing. Yeah, and there's so many things I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
I want to go back and talk about a few things, but I will say that, I am a huge fan of Wornstar. I have the products, many of the products, And, it's so cool I've sort of watched you grow from before you had your shop, which I assume you're currently in now, to what you are now. And it's been amazing because first of all, I live in Portland, Maine, which is it's either the first or last show on everyone's tour. So we're either usually the first show where the artists get warmed up for their tour. They start with us usually. And every rock artist that comes through is wearing Wornstar. And at one tour or another, everyone always has something Wornstar. Even if it's the headline big name to the little no-name opener, everyone's got something Wornstar on their show with wearing during the show. So it's so cool to see that sort of just explode. And I've seen a lot of copycats sort of come out of your growth. But I want to tell you, there's no one matching what you guys do quality wise and just visually. Your work is epic.
Oh, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate that. I think it's just a matter of I recognized where I was strong, which was creating the visuals and art directing. And I did it for several companies. I've worked with Dean Guitars, helped to build that brand. There's several other guitar companies and that I've helped build the brand for. So, and that's what I enjoy doing. And so it was a natural fit to take Wornstar and try to build our own. It's harder to build your own because you scrutinize your own work a little bit more when it represents you. But we love what we do. It's a lot of hard work. It's I wouldn't say that it exploded. I think it was kind of, a slow boil.
Sure.
And we just celebrated our 12th anniversary and we still think we're just getting started. I'm just starting to do stuff that I've been planning for 12 years.
Wow. That's awesome. It's so cool. I want to talk more about Wornstar, but I want to go back a little bit.
Sure.
A couple things that I had, when I was doing a little research before we got started, I was looking at your music history. Now, it's one thing that popped up was you had some stuff on MTV. What was it? Headbangers Ball back in the day.
Yes.
What were you doing back then? What was that?
That was a band called Barracuda.
Okay.
You can find at least one of the videos on YouTube. You may be able to find both of them. We shot 2 videos. We were on a small little independent label. This was 1989, 1990.
Yep. That's at the
was
peak of Headbangers Ball, really.
I was 19 years old. I was in a band locally. It was a 4-piece band. I was a guitar player, and the singer and the drummer left. So it was me and the bass player. And so we had an ad out looking for, a singer and a drummer. And we got a call from a singer for a band, looking for a guitar player and bass player. So we talked about it. Me and the bass player talked about it, and we were really interested in it. And then we were going to audition, we met with the singer and checked out the music, and was like, okay, it was all right. It was good. It wasn't my favorite.
Sure.
It was, that hair metal genre.
Yeah.
But I was kind of over that at that time. That was when bands like, what bands were coming up then? Lynch Mob and Skid Row, where they were getting a little edgier, and then eventually Guns N' Roses and Mother Love Bone and stuff like that I was into. But the rest of the guys in the band were older than I was. So when it came to and we, me and this bass player that I was working with, we sort of liked the music. It was cool, but it was more about, hey, we get to be in a signed band and do stuff we wanted to do. It was an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So the morning of the audition comes up, and the bass player comes to my house, and he's like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, I really enjoy our band. We're writing our own music, and it's our own thing. We want to have our own thing. And I go, okay, see ya. And I went and auditioned and got the gig. So 2 weeks later, a week later, we were doing band photo shoots. And 2 weeks later, we were shooting our first video. on a big stage in Elgin, Illinois. And then we did some other pickup stuff at our rehearsal spot. And that was the video that came out. And that was out in late 89, we shot in late 89. So it came out in early 90, January, February of 90. And it was weird at first. All my friends watching it on MTV and kind of freaking out. We're sitting in a house in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, watching it on TV, and it was a little weird, and but it was cool. It was suddenly I was in a signed band, and we were treated differently, and it was cool, and it was fun, and so we did some small tours. I mean, this is back in again in '90, where we're five band guys and one or two crew guys in a crummy van pulling a trailer. Sleeping on the floor of an Astro van or whatever it was, a conversion van. And, but it was fun. I mean, I was 19, 20 years old. I didn't care. It was, we made enough money to get a hotel room or two and, share a box of cereal for breakfast. It was what everybody else calls the good old days, but it was it's at that age, you just didn't care. It was what you wanted to do. So yeah, we shot a second video in Brooklyn, New York. And those videos came out on MTV, limited play, but I mean, there was a lot of new bands that were popping up. We were one of that group. Yep. Excuse me. I got tired of it, tired of that band. There was just some friction and stuff that I didn't enjoy. And I had taken a semester off of school to tour. I was still in junior college. So I left that, went back to school, and joined bands after that and played for a little while longer till the mid 90s. And then I just walked away completely. Yeah.
You still play it all at all, or?
Not really. No, it's kind of, I don't miss it. I get everybody asks that, do you miss it? And I'm like, no, I don't. I mean, it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. There's nothing like playing live. I preferred the creative process. I preferred the writing and recording and going over parts and all that stuff. I preferred that. But I ended up in bands where all people cared about was playing live and not putting together a good band. Or a good product even. And that's what I was about. I was about making it look and sound cool and being the best it is. And I couldn't find other musicians that cared enough about it the way I did and liked the same stuff that I did. So I decided to walk away from it. But no, I don't play anymore. When I started designing guitars, it was funny because, part of my deal with some of these guitar companies is I would get each guitar I designed, I would get a sample of it. So I had a really big guitar collection of guitars I could never have afforded back then. I mean, when I was 19, I was playing, I had two guitars and they were both under $600. And, I had a little half stack. Actually, my amp is still sitting behind me over here.
Nice.
Beat up. It still sounds good, but I don't really play it.
Yeah. I've seen like every so often I see you have like on Facebook or something like that, a stack of guitars you're selling that you had custom made and stuff like that. I'm like, man, those things look amazing. You have some beautiful guitar work you've done.
Well, thank you. I hated to get rid of them. It was, we were, the brand was starting to grow. We had a lot of bills to pay. I had so many guitars. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to display all these. The older I get, the less nostalgic I get. There's a few that I wish I didn't sell because they were beautiful and I kind of want to have them when I get old, but I kind of had to let them go. I still have a few left. And now I'm displaying a few here in the showroom.
Nice. So moving forward to your college days now, back then versus today, graphic design, I'm assuming was very different from what it is now. Everything's Adobe and all that stuff. What was sort of graphic design when you started? What was that like?
Oh, I started on a little Mac Classic. But when I started at Columbia, they had just started a computer lab. They had a few Macs. I started on Photoshop 2.0
Wow.
before Photoshop had layers even. So you had to so it was good for me because I learned, and I still work this way. I learned to work non-destructively, to where save all my layers, save the channels and all that stuff. But back then they were slow, and there weren't really any classes in it. I took a couple of the computer classes when I was at college, but most of the classes were design classes, traditional design classes, and typography and stuff like that. But the computer classes, since it was so new, they weren't that good because you had to be recommended for the class, first of all. And then when you get into the class would work as slow as the slowest person in the room. And we had people at that time, it was like, they didn't know what a mouse was. They didn't know what a menu was. They didn't know what a cursor was, stuff like that. Whereas I taught myself all of that at home. So, so I didn't do a lot of computer stuff, computer design at college. It was a little bit, but most of that stuff I taught myself at home.
Nice.
When I graduated my junior college and I decided I wanted to go in that direction, my grandmother bought me my first computer. She bought me a Power Mac 7600.
Nice.
So I'm grateful for that, and that's what started it.
Nice. Moving on a little bit, I also read that you've done some more graphic design and some work with Stern Pinball. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, how did that come about? And is that the Zeppelin one? Is that part of it?
Yeah, that's one of it. That's one of them right there.
Beautiful. How do you get involved with that? And then what are you doing with that? Okay.
Well, first I had a good friend who was the artist relations guy over at Washburn Randall Amps, Washburn Guitars. It was right over here in Mundelein until I moved to Canada, I believe. So he was there for a while. We got along really well, and I did some work for Washburn through him. And then he left that company and went over to Stern Pinball. And he was working there for a while in marketing, and they had lost their art director. And it was a time when, this was maybe 7-8 years ago, when it was still, the company Wornstar was still small. I was still doing freelance, and it was really still, again, hard to pay the bills. So I started looking for a full-time job. He got wind of it, contacted me and said, "Hey, we're looking for an art director at Stern Pinball." And I said, "That sounds really cool." So I applied for that. I got the job. I was the art director at Stern for a little over a year. I stayed there for a while. So my first job for them was art directing the AC/DC pinball machine.
Sweet.
And we always joke, me and my friend, he's actually still there at Stern Pinball, that we had to leave the music industry to work with bands like AC/DC and Metallica and all that. So yeah, I was the art director there. I worked on AC/DC, X-Men, let's see what else, Avengers, Metallica, and a couple other that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But then I left. I got an offer to be a freelance creative director for Diamond Guitars out of Houston, which is no longer there, which is now owned by somebody else. So where I was going to get paid the same amount of money I was making at Stern to work from home for only 20 hours of the week, so I could focus the other 20 hours or more, the other 100 hours on Wornstar. So it was actually a perfect situation. I couldn't pass it up.
Yep.
I felt bad leaving, but so I left right after Metallica. And then one of the game designers I was working with that I really got along with, we hadn't done a game. Well, we were doing one game. We did X-Men together. But he was working on The Walking Dead and really wanted me to work on that. So they hired me on contract to design Walking Dead. So the Walking Dead was actually the first one where I art directed and designed the whole thing. Before I did art direction and some design, and we hired other illustrators. Walking Dead, it was all me. I still, before actually going back, before I started doing the art direction for them, I was doing photography for them. I was doing all their product photography. So every time a new game would come out, they would hire me to come out and do photos of it.
Yeah.
So then I still did the photography afterwards. I still do their photography to this day. So every game that comes out, I shoot it.
That's
and
awesome.
So then so I did The Walking Dead. That was great. I loved doing that because it was right up my alley. It was the style that I could do and do well. And then, but I do music stuff really well. So when like I said, I still kept in contact with them. I still know most of the people there. And they kind of hinted to me, hey, we're going to be working on Led Zeppelin. And my friend was like, we really think you should be the guy to do it. I'm like, sounds great. I would love to do it. I'm like trying to play it cool because I'm like,
Hell yeah.
I love Led Zeppelin. And if you're going to work with a great band and a great brand, that's the band you want to work with. But I knew it would be difficult. But I also knew I was really busy. So they were kicking around with a few other designers and weren't getting what they wanted. And they wanted me to do some comps. And I said, I really don't have the time. Unless you're going to hire me, I don't have the time. So it's like, pull the trigger and we can do it. I mean, you guys know I can do it. So
Right.
that's what it came down to. They worked, they had a few other people that weren't able to do anything. You know, there's 3 different games. They each did 3 different designs. And then they contacted me and said, okay, you're the guy. You know what? We'll pay you to do the comps. And if we like the comps, we'll hire you to do the game. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. And whereas everybody else did 3 comps, I did 9. And they loved all 9 of them. So they're like, okay, you're the guy. And it was a blast. So Led Zeppelin was the latest game that I did. I had to have one. So I got one for the showroom. Nice little tie-in for my rock and roll brand. But that was a lot of fun. It was very difficult working with a brand, looking at a brand and a band like that.
Yeah.
Because you kind of got to stay true to everything that they do and the licensing.
What goes into designing that stuff? Are you given sort of specifics, or are you just said, how is the design of a pinball machine conceived basically?
Well, there's a game designer that designs the game, the way the game shoots, the way all the lanes are and where the ball goes and ramps and whatever other hardware is on the play field. And then there's the visual, which is what I would do. And so I have to design the whole cabinet, the whole box you see on the outside, the whole play field, the wooden area where the ball goes, and all the little parts that go onto that. And kind of, you got to think in 3D, but you're designing in 2D.
Yeah.
Because you're designing in layers on a play field, and it's really difficult. It's a lot of fun though. I didn't have a lot of leeway with what I could do with the cabinet because, Led Zeppelin's really strict. They're like, you can use album artwork, but with the play field, I was able to explore. And so I took one of their old posters, one of their old concert posters, and did a modern version of that, and did what I would do if I was designing their poster for this concert if it happened today.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's just a lot of graphic design, and then it gets printed directly onto wood and onto decals, and it's a total blast. But it's hard because you don't get to see what the whole thing is going to look like until they build the first one.
Right. Jeez, that's awesome. That's super cool. That's fascinating to me. It's like I did package design when I first started out, so it's like package design but on a much higher level. Yeah, definitely. That's so you had mentioned that you went to Diamond Guitars, but was Dean prior to that, or was that after that?
No, Dean Guitars was I worked with a lot of different companies. I did some stuff for Washburn, BC Rich, ESP, and a lot of smaller brands, but Dean Guitars was the first one I started working with. That was in early 2004. And I started doing just like catalog work for them. And then they saw what I could do, and I did poster designs and all that. But it was Dean Guitars. I was the art director there for years. And I left, and Diamond Guitars happened between Jeff Diamond, who I worked with at Diamond Amps, and Dean Zielinski, who came together, started a company without me, and then a few years later, those two guys split up, and Jeff contacted me asking if I wanted to come back and work for him, and I had some stipulations, but then we did it, and I think we did some amazing stuff. But we were it was a small company, and there were some of my favorite guitars I designed for them. But we were also that company that when you go to the NAMM show, every other bigger guitar company was coming to our booth and taking pictures of stuff. So like what we would do, suddenly you'd see at PRS and Schecter a year later.
Nice. Now, are you physically designing guitars for specific artists?
No, I would design stuff for, yes and no. At Dean Guitars, I would design the first guitar I designed was for Michael Schenker. So, which was, simple. It was he's just got black and white guitars.
Yeah.
Excuse me. They had a guitar designer there. And when I talk about guitar design at that point, it was just really the graphic that goes on the guitar, the look, the overall look, and I would choose hardware and all that. I wouldn't actually physically design the guitar. But so they had a deal with Michael Schenker. They did electric for him, and then he wanted to do an acoustic. And the girl that was designing for them just couldn't quite grasp Michael Schenker. I don't know if she knew who he was.
Yeah.
But she didn't know who he was, but I knew who he was. So I'm like, well, it's an acoustic guitar. It's white on the top, black on the bottom, and play with the shapes. And so I designed that. And again, the first thing that I designed, they're like, that's great, we're making that. And then like a week or so later, they were bringing Dimebag Darrell back to Dean Guitars after he had left Washburn. And they called me up and they said, you want to design guitars for Dimebag Darrell? I'm like, I think I can do that. So yeah, I designed guitars for a lot of different artists, but Dimebag being the biggest one. And then I also designed different model guitars, the body shapes and different graphics. But these were never, some of them were made as one-offs, but most of the time they were for production. I worked with Darrell to design his line before he was killed, and that we slowly rolled out over the next few years. But from there, I started working with, everybody. The list is too hard for me to remember. It's too long for me to remember.
Yeah, I see Zach Wilde on there and a few others as well. Leslie West,
Leslie was
Cantrell. Great. Yeah.
The Cantrell one was amazing because I'm a huge Alice in Chains fan. So Cantrell didn't fully happen. He was going to come on when Darrell came on board. Suddenly he brought all his friends with him. We were talking to Zach, we were talking to Kerry King, we were talking to, everybody that he knew. He was so loved and brothers with all these people. And Cantrell was one of them. And we were going to design guitars for Cantrell, like a Les Paul style, and then like his GNL style. And what I always say about my career is that it's a series of holy crap moments. So I had guitars shipped to my house. Like when I worked on Kerry King's guitar, there was a guitar shipped from BC Rich to my house. You open up the case and there's a sign saying, be very careful. This is Kerry's actual guitar. Like, okay. But when I worked on Cantrell's guitar, a guitar arrived at my house and it was his Degradation Trip Les Paul with all the cigarette burns in it. It was the actual guitar. And I'm like, holy crap. I got to be very careful with this.
Yeah.
But so we designed a bunch of stuff and ended up not happening. I designed a lot of guitars that never saw the light of day.
Yeah, and just looking through the list, I mean, you got George Lynch on there, Rick Emmett, Zoltan, so many people on that list. Damn. All amazing guitarists, and they all have killer guitars as well, too. So
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing all that stuff. I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had the time. And those guys, I don't have anything bad to say about any of those guys. They're all fantastic to work with. I did the most work on the least amount of time with Daryl, but the most work on his stuff. He and I, when we met, we sat in a hotel room and just spent the entire day designing guitars until he got dragged to go play his gig. And we got along great. It was fantastic working with him. But yeah, I designed some stuff for George Lynch over at Washburn. I did an acoustic for him. Like I said, Kerry King over at BC Rich.
Yep.
Zoltan at a few different companies. I did a lot of stuff. I did a lot of stuff for Dave Mustaine when he was at Dean Guitars.
Nice.
So that was fun too.
So I see that we're now building this contact list for future Wornstar products is what I'm seeing coming out of this.
Sort of. Well, you got to be a nice guy. I got along with all those people, and I make it a point to, just try and be a nice guy and work well with and not be a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they'll want to keep working with you.
That's the key to it too, is really just building a strong, good relationship with a lot of people. Cause there's a lot of people who, just kind of get a little bit of an ego when, you're around that stuff. So it's hard to, but it's really important.
I learned quickly that I just try and treat them as equals. That's, and I've worked with some people that had really big egos that we didn't get along. But most of the people I work with have been fantastic. And so if you're fair with them and you do a great job, if you're reliable, they keep calling you back.
Yeah. So and you kind of mentioned this in regards to you working part-time designing stuff, but then you're also spending every last minute of your waking moments working on Wornstar or building that up and stuff like that. How does the concept of Wornstar come to fruition? Was it you and your wife just kind of saying, let's try this? I mean, you kind of touched on this already briefly.
Yeah. We wanted to have, from a business side of things, when I was designing guitars for Dean Guitars, I had a deal where, like I told you, I would get a guitar and I also would get royalties. And the royalty checks showing up in the mail were nice, extra money.
Yeah.
And so when I was kicking around the idea of doing, let me step back a little bit. When we're talking about, we'd kicked around the idea, Sylvia and I, of starting a company, starting a clothing company. We had a name for it. We had an idea of what we wanted to do. And when I started working with Daryl, with Dimebag Daryl, he was doing a deal with another clothing company to start his own sub brand called Dimebag Hardware. And he and I got along really well. I only knew him for a few months, but we got along really well. And he'd asked me to, he's working on his logo for his company. He's not happy with it. He wanted to give it to me to see if I could, make it better. And so I did, and he loved it. And then that in conjunction with all the designs I was doing for the guitars, he would call me up and go, from now on, you're the guy. You're my guy for all this stuff. I'm like, great, awesome. I love it. Let's do it. So when he was starting this Dimebag Hardware thing, we were talking about doing, he was talking about me doing the art for it and being a part of that whole thing. But then when he was killed, that all kind of fell apart. The people that were working on it, that were partnering with him, his girlfriend and the clothing company, reached out to me to still be part of it, but they wanted me to come on as an employee and just be a designer and just sell off my designs to them.
Yeah.
Which is not what Daryl and I had discussed.
Right.
So I said, no, thanks, not interested. And I let it sit for a while until Sylvia and I came up late. This was then probably about 4 or 5 years later, we decided to start building this thing. And between that whole idea and the idea of the royalties, we're like, well, what if we started our own thing and we own the whole thing?
Yeah.
We're not just getting little royalty checks or anything like that. I mean, little do you know that you got to put all the money into it, and it'll be years before you make any money.
Yeah.
But
you don't get much sleep either.
no, but we started that and said, let's do our own thing. And the funny thing is that it took off. we knew how to promote it. We kind of built it on Facebook, and we built it with favors from friends. And we started doing road shows and getting out there and just hammered it hard and put it. And at first no one was interested. And then more and more people started picking it up. More and more people started buying it. We were getting no love locally. Suddenly the local bands would start to pick, because they would see the national bands wearing it and go, okay, there must be something to that. I'll check it out. But it was a lot of work to get there. And you know, it took Sylvia and I probably almost 10 years before we started paying ourselves. Now we would take distributions and pay our bills, but we didn't take a salary for the first 10 years.
Yeah. Damn.
So it was a lot of work, but I mean, like I said, we loved doing it. And, you know, we knew we were sitting on something that, that could basically, we could live on for the rest of our lives. Hopefully we can put our kids through school, and love what we do.
Yeah.
And there's not a day that I come to the office that I'm like, I don't want to be here, unless I'm really tired, but I love what I do. I love the people we work with. I've got great employees now. I've got great clients, great customers. So.
Yeah. Back in 2013 for me, we were getting ready to do our video shoot, and we were like, all right, we need to kind of figure out wardrobe stuff. And I already been following you. I had a couple of the t-shirts and stuff like that, so we ordered some custom shirts made from your wife she custom designed for us, and we wore those in the video. And I was like, man, I still get that stuff. It was like there's literally no place else I could go to that had sort of that foundation already started. I could call designers and say, I want something cool. And they'd be like, well, give me this design. I'm like, I have no idea what I want. Where you guys already had sort of that foundation started. And I could just say, yeah, I like this with that and with that. And this is my size and so on. So, you guys, in my opinion, you guys really struck that void that there was nothing. And then like I said, all the bands, I started seeing everybody wearing these things.
Yeah, we just looked around and figured out what was missing.
Yeah.
And some things we got lucky, and some certain things that came out at the right place, the right time. There's some things we swung and missed, but overall I couldn't be happier with where the company is. And I was saying before, I was struggling to find, bands to work with to design their merchandise. And then I start this company, and suddenly every band was asking me to design their merchandise, and they wanted to look like Wornstar. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that?
Yeah,
I'm like, you had your chance.
Right. But you guys have your style for the products were just like nailed it. I mean, they were just right on. You just had that design look, and the way, it was, put together and everything. You guys just nailed it right out of the box, so to speak. Whereas, like I said, everyone else was just sort of copying what I saw you guys doing.
Yeah, we got a lot of copycats, a lot of direct knockoffs, a lot of people taking our designs and photoshopping their logos onto it.
Yeah,
it's really. I'm not saying we're the bigger we got, the harder it got to deal with that stuff. But there's some that came and went, and the problem is that the ones that disappeared, they all thought it was a big competition. They would slam us and say all kinds of garbage about us, and we didn't reciprocate. My goal was never to be better than them. My goal was to be better than our own stuff.
Right.
It's like, it goes back to the way I always worked. It was, I just want to be better at everything, or I'm not trying to compete with the small people. I'm trying to compete with what's ahead of me.
Yeah.
I want to be like that, the big brands, not like these little brands.
Yep.
When I was in bands, it was the local scene. It was so chaotic, and it's so toxic. I hated it because everybody was trying to, I want to be better than this band. I want to be better than that band. I want to be the best band in Chicago. And like, in 1989, I'm like, I didn't care to be better than the band that we were opening for. I wanted to be as good as Bon Jovi, or as good as,
right.
As good as Skid Row. I didn't care what the local band was doing next to me. They were friends and everything, but I just wanted to be, we just aimed much higher, and I didn't understand these little brands that were coming out copying us.
Yeah.
And if you're going to copy us, why blatantly rip it off? Why not be inspired by it and come up with your own?
Right.
I do that as a designer all the time. I find something I like of somebody else's, and may or may not be in the clothing industry. I'm like, that's really cool, but I want to do my own version of that.
Right. Yeah.
So as some designers can look at my stuff, and if I show them where my inspiration came from, they'll go, I see it now.
Hey, thanks for watching part 1 of our interview with Stephen Jensen. We hope you enjoyed it. You can catch our other guests and all of our other episodes at your favorite podcast locations, on YouTube, and at talesfromthepit.net. We'll see you next time.